All right, good morning. We're going to be talking about social credit scores and social engineering and social contagions this morning. Yeah, buddy. So, yeah, hold on to your boo-boo. Fishing, golf, and guns with first blood. GCM, FTP, good morning, baby. Let's do this. And good morning. Ooh, I forgot one of the lights, but I think I'm bright enough. I think the shirt makes up for the missing studio light. We'll be okay. So, good morning. I see Fishing, Golf, and Guns, and GCM already said good morning. Two strikers with us. Pitt Danny, good morning. There's your Majesty. And the Fit Life joins us on a Monday morning, which means she's got a new blog out, I assume. Danny, I'm sorry. I haven't looked. I actually haven't checked to see your new blog yet this morning, but because I've been working on this show this morning, and I've got a bit of a presentation for you. So here's what I want to talk about. We have had conversations in the past, which I will reference this morning, and I've pulled up some oldie but goodie articles with reference to those. But I want to talk about social contagion, social credit scores, and social engineering. So it's kind of hard to it's kind of hard to know where to start off with this. So I've introduction. We're going to talk about social credit score, social contagion, China's social credit score system as kind of an exemplar of the problem, and the newly released environmental justice executive order from the Biden administration, which is so many levels of stupid. It's just psychotic. So we've got a couple of terms here that need to be defined first. And I think I'll start with social contagion. So a social contagion, generally speaking, and you can have a social contagion without social media. The problem is that social media makes this, it's like taking your patient zero and putting them in a higher density population, right? So it'd be one thing if everybody in the valley started using the word like as every part of speech. And then over time, as it gets onto television, it starts to infect other corners of the world. It starts to get across the country, and all of a sudden you've got, pretty little girls in South Georgia, like totally like talking like they like can't hold two like thoughts together, like like at the same time, like that. And it's a great example. It's incredibly infectious. Have a conversation with somebody who drops the likes over and over and over again like that, right? And it'll start to infect you. Now, that particular example is the use of a filler word in lieu of but, so instead of sounding like A.G. Garland, you sound like a ditzy blonde prostitute out of South California. That is a very basic and common example of the social contagion. That one swept through the whole country like a wildfire in the mid-90s. And you hear me using the word like correctly in context, and it still comes up often because it is the word that we use to make comparisons, right? A is like B. And that's the correct usage of the word. So it's not foolish to use the word generally. It's foolish to use the word excessively. But that was a great example of an early modern social contagion, which in and of itself was relatively harmless. Obnoxious, granted, but harmless. Now, you fast forward to 2000 and anything, basically once social media becomes a thing, and the more the adoption of the use of social media generally takes hold, we see more and more social contagions. And there are the big obvious ones, the gigantic spike in LGBTQ identification, the sudden rise in certain types of political activism, which include excessive political violence. Those are also the results of social contagions. But those social contagions, the ones that spread so quickly and easily on social media, are rooted in the same thing. They are all rooted in narcissism. I have a great example of it. One of the current social contagions that's especially dangerous is the whole fat pride, fat phobia thing. And we just had an event, I guess you could call it, a couple days ago. Lizzo, right? Lizzo is the just poster child for fat pride. And she does this video where I am the beauty standard. And I have had the unfortunate displeasure of being witness to the video itself. It's a video of a fat woman getting out of the shower, throwing on a bathrobe that doesn't cover enough, and starting to do her makeup and talking about how gloriously, fabulously beautiful she is. Listen, I know fat people. I'm 4 out of 5 of the fat people I know. And I understand there is a certain thread of irony to me talking about narcissism and the use of social media, being somebody who does a YouTube show every day. And let's face it, those of you who know me are well aware I have an extremely elevated opinion of myself. Now, let's also be fair. I have a pretty solid degree of education. I'm taller and smarter than most people you meet, and I've achieved some pretty incredible things in my life. I have a not unearned, very high opinion of myself. Lizzo is fat, and she has an extremely high opinion of how beautiful her fatness is. And hey, look, I get that some people are fat because of a glandular thing, et cetera, et cetera. I'm fat because I don't run 100 miles a week anymore, and I still eat like I do. That's fair. But to be clear, I am not Lizzo fat. I'm pretty sure I'm a foot taller and probably 50 or 60 pounds lighter. I'm a big boy, right? Be fair. Now, all that said, my mother says I wanted my child, that's me, to have a positive self-esteem. And I will say this about Terry McGinnis Lowry. She achieves objectives. St. Michael says, flabulous. I've got to give you that one, baby. That's solid. That is solid. Flabulous. That might warrant an emoticon. So that's kind of a serviceable definition and topic analysis on the concept of social contagion. So let's move on to social credit scores. When we're talking social credit score, understand we're going to talk about the China situation a little bit. You've heard the term ESG. That stands for environmental, social, governance. It's an ESG score, and it is a mechanism by which companies are scored essentially on their wokeness, right? You don't get a positive E for environment by innovating some impressive way to reduce carbon emissions. You get a positive score for E because your company donates money to climate alarmists. You don't get a positive score for social because you do a good job of promoting your brand to the world, or you do something positive for the world. You get a good job for social by contributing money to radical left-wing causes. You don't get a good score in governmental by proposing, say, auditing the Federal Reserve or eliminating ridiculous high taxes that cause companies to move overseas. You get a high score on governmental by funding things like government-funded abortion, right? ESG is a corporate wokeness score. We'll get to Biden's environmental justice executive order a little more in just a minute, but that is another part of that whole problem. And I'll come back to the New York gun law. That's something we're going to have to talk about within the context of the social credit score and social engineering. And then finally, the last term that needs to be defined is social engineering. Social engineering is a concept that is extremely familiar to what we call to the hacker community, right? You guys may or may not be tracking that last week or over the weekend, Matt Walsh got hacked. And Tim Pool said he was hesitant to talk about the type of hack that it probably was. And as would I have been given my background, Tim Pool's background involves being involved with the hacker community. And people don't understand what hackers are. The average citizen thinks hacker, and they see a pimply teenager taking over an important government infrastructure at a keyboard, typing away in green on black screen. No. A lot of what is called hacking, it comes down to stuff like social engineering. And what that is, like, for example, I want to get my hands on your credit card, or enough of your credit card information that I can steal money from you, right? I don't have to break into a computer, figure out your password, et cetera, et cetera. I can introduce to you a threat. I don't have to make the threat myself. I can make you believe that a threat exists, which justifies, requires, necessitates your taking a predictable action in response to the threat, right? And that predictable action will be to do something to change passwords, or, right, you will take steps to increase your security, your information security. And as you're working to improve your InfoSec, ComSec, OPSEC, PERSEC, etc., when you're making those changes, you expose vulnerabilities to your systems, right? Another mechanism of social engineering, and this is what probably got Matt Walsh, is I can call the customer service for, let's say, your cell phone. The expectation is that he was hit with a SIM clone hack. So somebody called customer support for whoever the carrier is that carries his cell phone, pretended to be him, somehow answered the security questions right, had enough of his personal identifying information to convincingly pretend to be Matt Walsh. This is hypothetical, but it's a well-informed professional analyst's hypothetical interpretation of a probabilistic source for the known outcome. So they call customer support, they pretend to be Matt Walsh, and they convince the customer support to mail them a replacement SIM card, maybe even a phone to go with it, by claiming that they lost the phone was damaged, the SIM chip was damaged, something of the sort. And what they get is a phone that contains all of that useful information so that they can access his social media and start making posts on his, as him. That's social engineering. There is another type of social engineering that is less commonly referred to as social engineering, and you can see it very clearly in the tax code. I plan on doing a whole show on the tax code in the future. We've talked about it before, but understand that the rate of graduation of the tax code makes it disadvantageous for a sort of donut hole right around the low six-figure mark, where you go from you're paying no taxes to you're getting back everything you paid in taxes to you're paying enough taxes to overtake the difference between what you're earning in bracket C and what you were earning in bracket B. So you get a big raise at work, and all of a sudden the change in tax bracket is enough that it's as if you didn't get a raise at all. That's not an accident. That is social engineering to perpetually suppress the advancement of individuals in climbing the social and economic ladder. That is because the people who make the decisions are socially engineering you to prevent you from achieving. They don't want the slaves to rise up and become masters. They don't want you to get better. They want to discourage you from it. Now, so did I cover all three of them? I gave you a definition for social contagion. I gave you a definition for social engineering. Okay, I need to define social credit scores. Okay, social credit scores. The idea behind social credit scores, and let me get up the next piece of my presentation here. I covered social engineering, hackers, legislators, tax code. So social credit scores. China already has a sort of social credit score system, and it is a system which seeks to codify and modernize China's long-standing caste system. I actually don't know what the Chinese word for what they call it, but China has a very graduated social hierarchy system, kind of like in India. It's a little less formal than the Indian system of Brahmins and untouchables and the like, but it's similar. The social credit score seeks to make that work in a very technical way. So a Chinese citizen will have a social credit score, kind of the way that you have a financial credit score. And having a low social credit score, which you end up with a low social credit score by posting things online which are not positive in the view of the government by associating with people, which can be seen through your social media because, if the evil white supremacist likes your post about kittens and puppies, then you have an association there and you lose a point, right? So a lower social credit score can be viewed by prospective employers, prospective lenders, prospective clients, and used as a decision point on whether or not to do business or engage with you as a person. The social credit score, if left unchecked, will affect your ability to purchase a home more than will your actual credit score. And that's also not by accident. Okay, so we already covered Lizzo. I want to go back to the social engineering thing. But this is social engineering plus social credit score. And one of the first big offenders that we saw there was a Supreme Court decision last year, which struck down some of the most ridiculous anti-Second Amendment laws in the country, where many states like New York, California, New Jersey, several others, Hawaii, were may issue states. Right. I'm happy to report, I think it was Nebraska that just went constitutional carry. And without getting into why constitutional carry is a misnomer, we are now at 27. So more than half of all states have some version of constitutional permitless carry. You can carry, even concealed, a firearm on your person in more than half the states in the union. That's a big deal. That's a good thing, and that's probably going to be our topic on Friday because we just welcomed another one in. But when the Supreme Court struck down the shall issue distinctions, suddenly it should theoretically be easier to own and carry, to keep and bear arms in New York, California, Hawaii, etc. Well, New York responded with this. New York approves gun law requiring buyers to provide social media handles. New York Democrat Governor Kathy Hochul signed a new gun control bill Friday after the Supreme Court ruled last week that the state's rules that make it difficult for residents to obtain a concealed carry permit were unconstitutional. By the way, now I forget the name of the case. It was Brown something. It was a gun club versus the state of New York. I don't remember the name of it off the top of my head. I'm sure it'll come up in the article. But it's important in this context to remember that the particular SCOTUS case that deemed the New York carry laws unconstitutional was a case where a gun club sued the state of New York or the city of New York. I think it was the state of New York. But the latest gun legislation was signed into law after New York's Democratic-controlled legislature passed the proposal. Hochul called the legislature back to Albany on Thursday for an extraordinary session to work on the bill in response to the High Court's decision. The law struck down by the Supreme Court stated that gun owners would have to demonstrate proper cause to receive a concealed carry license. That is to say that New York's law used to say, if you want to exercise or even have the basic right to self-defense, you have to justify that to the state. Hey, mate, you got a license for that living thing. This in a state that kills more black babies than it births, by the way, before somebody calls me a racist. You shitburgers. So New York is actually putting it out where we're going to examine your social media and make sure that you have the right think before we allow you to have rights. If a state legislature thinks it can violate a right based on its political opinion of your social interactions, then what's to keep them from violating any right? Oh, you'd like a permit to exercise your First Amendment right to gather peaceably, speak freely, and petition your government for redress of grievances? Hold on a second. We see here on Facebook that you don't have the right think. So we're not going to tolerate, we're not going to permit you specifically, we're not going to permit you to speak freely and petition your government for redress of grievances. Now, if you had the right think and the grievances that you were petitioning for redress of included something like, oh, I don't know, we are protesting because we want our government to pay for us to murder our own children before they're born, you're in. You're good to go. That fact, right? That's not a hypothetical future that I've just described. That's ongoing currently. The DOJ has been actively prosecuting Christians who pray silently near abortion clinics at the same time that it has refused to arrest or prosecute terrorists in masks in the dark firebombing crisis pregnancy centers. Right? And so there are abortion clinics where if you're a stupid kid and you got knocked up because you stupid kidded, then you can just go and we'll solve all your problems with a sacrifice to Moloch. Then there are crisis pregnancy centers where you go and decent people help you either understand that 9 months is actually a lot of time to get your shit together, and you can do this, honey, because if you wait until you're ready to have kids, this is for dad. This is something that my father explained to me when I didn't have any kids. Now I've got 4 and we're doing great. If you wait until you're ready, you never will be. Keep that in mind. But 9 months is a lot of time to get your shit together. And believe it or not, I'm saying this to the young men out there. If your girlfriend suddenly tells you, baby, we're due in, 8 months, because you just don't know the first month or 2 usually. Baby, we're going to have a baby. Listen, young man, 18, 19, 20 years old, not ready, got a shitty job you don't like. This is a bit of a departure from the actual topic. 9 months is plenty of time to finish basic combat training, an A school, and get your wife, get married, get your wife co-located in military housing and have a legitimate job with legitimate benefits, and suddenly you are rocking and rolling and raising a family, and you're doing the right damn thing. But I digressed, because that's something that I feel very passionate about, is the care and raising of children. I'm coming up on the end of the hour. I may just have to pick this show up tomorrow and get back into the narcissism route, and talk a little bit more about the social credit score thing. So tomorrow I'll pick up where we left off today, and we'll get into Biden's new executive order. But here's a preview. The basic nuts and bolts of the executive order are this. If you have a low credit score, the Biden administration is going to reward your low credit score by giving you a discount on mortgages. If you have a high credit score, behavior that we would prefer, the new Biden administration executive order is going to charge you a penalty for your high credit score. Right? You will get a 1.75% discount on your mortgage if your credit score is below 620. and you will pay a 1% fee if your credit score is above 620. Okay? Remember, this is the U.S. government we're talking about. If you want more of something, you subsidize it. If you want less of something, you tax it. That's why we have a government that pays for abortions, that pays for transgender surgeries with your tax money, and taxes your income. Now, they're going to actively subsidize poor financial health and actively punish good financial health. I've said this 1,000 times before. We talk about it more, and we talk about it more when we're leading up to an election. The common understanding, the common midwit, low information voter understands that the image of the Democrat Party and the Republican Party is thus. The Republican Party is the party of rich old white men, and the Democrat Party is the party of poor everybody else and the common man. The logic follows. This is not complicated, but the logic follows that if that were the case, and to a degree it is, the Republican Party would be interested in making more people wealthy, and the Democrat Party would be interested in making more people poor. Right? If the common understanding holds true, then it is in the incentivized interest of the Republican Party for there to be more wealthy, successful people who vote Republican. And the Democrats would prefer that more people be poor and stupid and desperate so that they will vote Democrat. We don't quite see this bear out in policy because, as it turns out, all the rich old white people, all the really rich old white people, except for basically Donald Trump, are voting Democrat and supporting the Democrat policies. And there's a reason for that, too. As long as Democrats can hold on to the reins of power, then the rich people who need labor do not have to worry about their labor advancing themselves out of the slave market. So I'm going to go ahead and put a pin in it right there. And I'm going to have to pick this up tomorrow, and we'll dig into the social credit score and how it relates to Biden's new environmental justice executive order. And yeah, that should be fun. Y'all be safe out there. We love you. And I am in a Arctic Mule asked, do you think there should be any level of checks for buying a gun? Should any new checks be introduced, or should more be removed? That we've talked about that many times. We'll talk about it. We talk about it mostly on Fridays, Arctic Mule. Definitely come back and check us out for Firearms Fridays. But I'll just say this real quick. The Second Amendment says that the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. To infringe means to place things in adjacency to the subject of the verb. A thing which is infringed has something near it. In keeping with the language of the Second Amendment, anything short of the complete and utter abolition of all laws which refer to firearms in any way is unconstitutional. I would go so far, and I have before, and I will, and I always will continue to do so, to remind you that having taken the oath of office, and in keeping with Article 3, Section 3 of the Constitution, which defines treason, which is the only crime defined within the Constitution, every legislature or elected official who has ever put their name in any way in a positive function to any law which relates in any way whatsoever to the keeping and bearing of arms is a traitor and has, under the definition of treason under Article 3, Section 3, committed that act of treason in support of the domestic enemies of the United States of America, with full knowledge of the activity that they are doing so, before more than 3 witnesses, leaving evidence to support all 4 of those claims, and should be prosecuted, convicted if the evidence holds up, which evidence I've just listed, and then executed, as is the only penalty allowed for treason under the law, which is the Constitution, Article 3, Section 3. I hope that answers your question. Y'all be safe. We love you.